Very nice. I think we are live, and I'm gonna wait a minute just to make sure that everybody can connect, and then I'll start with this amazing webinar.
I see people are coming in, so we're gonna wait for a little bit.
Yes.
Hopefully,
All
for
right.
people,
I think
there is
what?
no heat wave. Hopefully, for people joining
No,
in,
exactly.
the heat wave is over. So
I hope for them because here it's not. At least where I am from, which is Italy. We're at the end of it, hopefully, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I guess we can kickstart the live since it's been 1 minute past 5. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me and Gennaro today. I'm Federica Busani, account executive here at WordLift, and I'll be moderate today's session and conversation. With me, there's Gennaro, Chief Revenue Officer at WordLift, who is going to walk us through how, as the title says, Google AI Overview decides who gets cited. And of course, we'll also give a bit of insights on how you can increase your chances to being one of those citations. In terms of what, with quick note on the format, very important. We've got about 35 minutes of conversation, and then at the end, we have 10 minutes for a live Q&A. So please start dropping questions in the chat as we go with the conversation. Quickly, what we'll cover today. First, we're going to explain why we say that AI overviews change a bit the rules. And then, of course, also what AI overview actually looks for when deciding who to cite. From there, we'll get into something that, in our experience, most teams and companies haven't really thought about yet, which is a bit the economics of tokens and why that's becoming a bit of a bottleneck also for AI visibility for both enterprises, but also for Google itself. And then we will bring it all together in the 4-step framework, which is the core of this session, including how to measure whether it's actually working. And then, of course, as I said, we'll move to the question. So let's start, Gennaro, from you, and also thank you very much for joining with me today. Let's start with the why. Why does any of these really matter right now in mid 2026? And if I am a SEO manager today, what's actually different from the past?
Yep, amazing to be here. And of course, for us, this is a little bit of a chance to also talk to like the community, meaning there is no one who has fixed answer to what is working today and what is going to work in the future. We all test and learn, right? So the most interesting aspect of our job is that on a daily basis we can talk to each other to understand what's working, what's not working, but also a little bit share our experience. So today is not like a workshop, meaning like a place where we teach you anything. Rather, it's like an exchange of ideas where we tell you what we see, and then of course we look forward to hearing your perspective, also to enrich our own. So that's a bit the spirit of the series that we'll be doing together. So long story short, you all know where we are, meaning there is not much fluffing about it. You all know that today we live in a bit of different world that we were just a few years back. And to be fair, I mean, with the team at WordLift, we've been doing what used to be called semantic SEO back in the days, which was a way for us to actually trigger more advanced features of Google, because even though in the first years of after the ChatGPT moment, as we all know, Google had a little bit of issues to keep up with what was going on. On the other side, we know that Google has been one of the first companies to define itself as an AI company. We know that the transformer architecture that we have today that is powering most of LLMs is coming from the research of the Google team. And we know that today, even today, like by combining the two organizational segments inside Google, which is Google Brain, what used to be Google Brain and Google DeepMind, we got Google AI, which is still like one of the most interesting AI companies to follow out there. So with this premise, of course, we know that, again, search landscape has changed. A lot of what used to go to the organic search right now is getting through like a synthesized answer. And the most interesting aspect, again, is Google is giving us a chance as, part of the SEO community to actually still be super relevant in this phase. Because long story short, being able to understand the logic of SEO, how machines think, how search engines think in this transitional phase is still like quite super relevant. So it still like matters a lot. So going forward, of course, with the development of the AI industry and more particularly how Google is adapting to it, there is a structural truth that we need to explain every day to, of course, our clients and the people that we work with, which is, of course, as we know, there is an effect. It's not always the case. Sometimes even impressions go down, but we see like a general effect of the impressions up, click down, meaning that, of course, given that right now, AI is able to cover more and more of the intents that users out there have when they ask anything to Google, and as Google is actually pushing more and more AI features into search. And for instance, let's keep in mind that in the last couple of years, Google was successful in rolling out AI overview that has become maybe one of the most powerful way for consumers to actually interact with AI, maybe even more powerful than ChatGPT itself in terms of like reach and scale of Google. Yet Google is still undergoing like a very strong transition, and the next phase is going to be for Google to roll up the Google AI mode in a very aggressive way, and then from there is going to be the agentic experience. So in this phase where AI overview as an important role is a transitional phase, and in this phase we're seeing like a structural downturn of clicks, which does not mean necessarily that it's bad for business, as we see across many clients in verticals where they own the product, they own the catalog. Actually, they are getting empowered right now because the traffic that they're getting, at least for what we see on our own experience, is that is many cases resulting in more business, more transaction. So it's actually better traffic, right? So I don't want to be extreme here, and as you know, like we're doing a workshop, and again we're exchanging ideas, but we are still again a transitional phase where search and SEO still matters a lot. And this is an opportunity for us to make sure that we translate this SEO advantage into like an AI advantage. And we need to build for signals that AI can trust, so that we can actually amplify at the best our brand, our products, and everything else that comes with it.
Thank you, Gennaro. And just before moving forward, I saw a message from Nicole that can't hear. In the background, we checked everything should be fine, but the session will be recorded anyway, so you can also listen to it later if you have any issue with connecting. Thank you, Gennaro, for this first overview of also the shift in the world of search. This what you just explained raises the obvious question. How does the model actually decide which sources to trust inside? What Google AI overviews actually look for?
Yep. So as usual, we try to be super practical, and therefore we need to have always like a sort of a playbook that we can test, and on top of which we can test and learn. But the reason why I'm making this premise, because before we get to that, we need to understand where we have been in the last 15 years, and then after we move forward. And sorry, maybe it's because I'm a lover of history that I tend to go always back in time, but also it's a reminder for people that follow us that again, today, where we are in a place where Google has been betting on AI for years, for decades, has been defining itself as an AI company for a long time. However, as we know, part of the bet was also like the symbolic one, right? So how do we build an infrastructure that is made of meanings? And as Google called it when it first acquired in 2010, Freebase through the acquisition on MetaWeb. Actually, the idea for Google was, how do I make a smarter web? So it was already back there. There was the idea that we needed to have a smarter web where we no longer would search through keywords, but we would have like a web of meanings, of things, on top of which we could do way more advanced things. And remember, back in 2017, 18, we had the first wave of like AI, voice assistants, which main idea was let's use infrastructure like semantic infrastructure to answer more complex queries and to make the web smarter. So this has been a long story, but where we are today in terms of like the AI landscape is quite important to understand that, of course, the ChatGPT moment has caught everyone off guard, meaning even for us being in the industry for such a long time and investing in AI already a decade back, we at least even in WordLift, we expected the AI wave to start with a symbolic one, right? So you need to decode, and you need to actually decode for the machine what is the meanings out in the world for the machine to actually get, and then from there reconstruct the word that is out there. Little we knew that actually the paradigm that will kick off this new AI wave was the deep neural net one. And then interestingly enough, where we are today in 2026, those paradigms of the deep neural net and the symbolic approach, so using things like a knowledge graph or like a semantic infrastructure, have merged. So it means that right now what is winning, the reason why even tools like Claude or like Anthropic or what Google DeepMind is doing and also OpenAI is doing, it's quite powerful, is because now we have the neurosymbolic wave, which is like the merge of those two landscapes that before were like getting explored even from an academic perspective as a separate journeys, right? Those things are working together. Now, what's a knowledge graph? Knowledge graph really basically it's hopefully you pass me this analogy. Let's call it as a sort of a website for an AI that is able to understand the meanings. So it's a sort of a database, a semantic database, where we can express through nodes and edges all the relationship that exist in a real world. So again, keep in mind that the main goal of a knowledge graph is to contextualize, so to ground, to make sure that whatever we do with an AI, we give it the chance to have a deeper understanding, to understand our local context, and to actually make sure that it can be valuable. Because one thing that we saw as soon as ChatGPT came out was that, of course, it was hallucinating. It was doing a lot of things that look good from the outside in terms of like next token prediction, but it was not accurate at all. So the role of something like the knowledge graph is to become like sort of a memory layer, a context layer. And there is also today what is giving an advantage for Google when it comes to the consumer space. Because let's remember that even OpenAI that wanted to build the layer for agentic commerce to actually empower it through its AI, it didn't manage to pull it off yet because it didn't have the infrastructure that Google has. And Google, let's remember that today as a shopping graph, which is what empowers a lot of the things that Google is able to do also from the UCP and agentic commerce perspective that OpenAI does not have. So that's a critical thing to understand. And going forward, just not to, otherwise we're going to spend the full session on this. Of course, that changes our assumption of how we do SEO and therefore AI search. Again, a quick premise, this does not mean that you got to stop doing what you were doing. Meaning, of course, if you're still doing things like backlinking or like classic SEO stuff, it's worth absolutely doing it, because as we know, even today, we're still missing the attribution pipeline to justify the full investment on digital marketing for AI search. So again, 80-90% of the business out there still run through the classic search landscape. This is what remembering, right? So what we're saying here is that what you want to do, you want to start bridging the gap between classic SEO and AI era signals, which means that even when you look at fundamental frameworks like the EAT framework, right? So the framework that Google has been using the last years to actually discern and discriminate between good and bad content, where a lot of it, as you can imagine, goes to from whom the content, I mean, can I trust the person brand from whom the content is coming in terms of, like, of course, again, experience, expertise, authority, and trust. Now, interesting thing is we can replicate those signal for AI by using like a semantic infrastructure, which is what we've been doing for years, and that for us at least has proved to be quite powerful, and we'll explain why in a bit. And again, this is something that you need to understand how to do it as well at tactical level, but also this is more strategic to understand. Now, how do you build, of course, usually a knowledge graph? The classic way, of course, to not to build, but let's say to expose the knowledge graph information on a web, it's actually through like a vocabulary that everyone in the SEO space knows. It's nothing new. It's schema.org, right? But the interesting thing is, it's not about schema.org. I think right now, even the way we do structured data has changed a lot. For us, for instance, at WordLift, the way we do structured data is completely different because it has changed the way and the function of structured data. Again, structured data today, of course, before it was for machines and search engines to better understand web pages at a more granular level. However, for how much you could understand the page, you didn't have like the power that an AI agent can have in actually traversing the meanings that we give it through like the structured data that we pass along. Now, you may say, why an LLM needs structured data in the first place? Can't it actually read the page? Yes, of course it can. The only problem is, in many cases, when an LLM is functioning through like a search interface, is not directly working as an LLM, is actually calling up in many cases like a search tool. And again, in the case of Google, as we'll see, a lot of the existing search infrastructure is getting used to actually expand. So it's a little bit decode and then expand, and then after ground, whatever answer comes to the Google AI overview. So the key point for you to understand, like a mental model for you to have, schema.org right now, today, even the way you use it has changed. Think of it as a sort of an API endpoint that you use to actually enable agents, so AI interfaces on the outside world, to actually understand not only the meanings and things and different level of things that we have on a website, but also the tools that we have on a website, and also like pretty much all the actions that, for instance, a potential user might take on a website. Therefore, you give the chance to an AI interface to have the flexibility to actually channel the user through it. So I'm going to move forward just for the sake of making it in time, and we can leave it to questions. But again, just to basic stuff, it's important to know that when even you're using basic entities within like schema markup, like author, brand, product, the reason why you're using them is because you want to reinforce the signal for an AI out there that then is going to be generating an answer for the user. This is the proper mental model to have. This is critical, and we'll show you why. One critical element of it is as one stat that came out in June from Cloudflare Radar that was quite interesting, is that for the first time we passed a web where bots were more than humans. Again, this is something that historically has been partially true, meaning the web has always been comprised of bots that were used for different purposes and to actually enable the whole search infrastructure that we have today. But again, never maybe to this level. And this tells us that we need to change the perspective, because right now, most of what we do on the web is getting used by those AI and those agents to actually then connect us to the proper user. Interesting thing is that connects to what we were discussing before. We, interestingly enough, have already an infrastructure that has been built 15, actually it's almost 20 years back, time flies, but already in 2006, for instance, Tim Berners-Lee, of course, had in mind the vision of this new form of web made of open link data, so like a sort of machine readable protocols and attributes that could help us actually structure knowledge in a way that would be accessible to machines. Well, today, building, for instance, a knowledge graph, exposing it through a schema.org vocabulary, and even more using like an open link data approach on top by using things like, for instance, technique like the JSON-LD, that is quite interesting as an approach because you don't overload the page. And then, of course, you also can sort of like specify all the relationships, not as separate templates, but all together, almost as we give the full meaning and the full scope of a page to like the AI interface out there, has become quite effective, at least for what we see on our side. And again, is not to go too much into technical discussion, because today, of course, one issue is you do structured data. Structured data might work through like schema markup. You might do it in the HTML, whatever, but that's not the point. As we'll see as we move forward, I don't want to spoil too much, but this is necessary, but is not sufficient. You need to do something more. That's why I'm introducing here a few concepts. So again, we started from the knowledge graph. We then talked about the schema.org vocabulary, and then we introduced the concept of like the open link data. That is a key standard that today might turn out to be like instrumental for what AI need to do on the web. So going back to now to inside the AI overview, it's as I was telling you again, inside the AI overview, and again, I'm talking about the AI overview. I'm not talking about AI mode or like more complex AIs out there that are doing way more, right? So I'm talking about a more simplified version of what an AI, an agent can do today, but still something that today is getting served at a scale of like billions of users. Is that actually Google is using, as we said, a lot of the infrastructure that it has. And for instance, the first step might be that of decomposing like a query to actually expand it in a way that give like, of course, the LLM in the background, the ability to have a much broader understanding of what we're trying to achieve as a user when we ask something on the web. And then with the sort of like fan out, of course, this AI overview is not going to be generated until then, of course, the generative model on the other side is able to retrieve after the fan out, and then is going to be able to ground and cite whatever comes out based on a stable, more stable infrastructure, right? Which goes back to the fact that we are lucky enough that Google is still like one of the most relevant players in the industry that gives us in the SEO space the understanding of what's happening next. Because again, before an answer within like an AI overview is getting grounded and then cited, of course, is retrieving also through a different infrastructure that Google has, that go from the web index to the knowledge graph to the shopping graph. So all those things in parallel. And there is a reason for that, but we'll cover it in the next section.
Very nice. So to compress concepts in a few lines, we talked about AI engines being evaluating entity clarity, schema being the language used to expose that clarity. We discussed that the web itself has become mostly machine traffic, or more or less the machine traffic is increasing, and that every citation that you saw in that diagram is really a 12 subqueries running in parallel behind the scenes. Which brings us, as I mentioned at the beginning, to something that doesn't really get talked about enough in AI visibility. What does it actually cost to run all these subqueries? Gennaro, walk us through why token economics is becoming a fundamental problem here, and not just for the enterprises trying to manage their AI budget, but also for Google.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, token economics is probably one of the most important industries that we'll see emerge in the next decade or two. And why we're covering this in the first place? Well, first of all, because when we're thinking about what we put out there for Google to pick up, it's very important to understand that, of course, we want to make it easy and convenient for the AI or Google to actually pick up our own data, because that is going to help its AI to ground whatever we're trying to be cited for, and therefore also be aligned with incentives that Google has at scale. Because let's remember that if you want to run a generative engine at scale like Google is doing, the only way to do it is actually to ground it in a way that makes it possible to reduce the token consumption. So it's very important to understand that, for instance, when we talk about inference, of course, for those following in AI, and I'm not going to all the other stuff, otherwise we make this too long, but in our next workshops, maybe we do cover all these other paradigms of AI when we go on the other tools and AIs like ChatGPT and Claude, and also more like Google AI mode and stuff. There are like two modes of inferencing, right? When an AI, before it gives you an answer, of course, there is the prefill and then there is the decode, right? Before, as an AI, before I give you an answer, I need to prefill, meaning that, of course, I need to make sure that I can read the prompt and make it pass through the weights of the model, whatever, in order to give you the answer. That context, that prefill is quite compute intense, meaning that I might spend a lot of budget, and most of the inference budget, if I'm an AI, might be going through this prefill phase. This means that if I'm doing SEO today, I also need to think in terms of like, how do I make sure that the AI on the other side is actually saving cost in finding my own first-party data so that it can get cited. And there is the mental model that I want to give you. And as I was telling you in the previous section, schema.org alone is necessary, but is not sufficient. That's why on top of the schema markup that you convey through, for instance, a knowledge graph, usually how we do it at WordLift, you need another couple of layers on top, meaning again, and this goes back to what I was saying like a couple of minutes back. You need to think of, how do I create multiple touch points? Because oftentimes in the SEO industry, we get lost in technical discussion, and we like, is an AI reading the JSON-LD or whatever? It's not the point. The point is, are you making it easy to an AI to find the information and the structured data through different touch points, so that you're creating the sort of flexibility and trust that the AI need on the other side to actually reduce the cost of running an inference engine at scale? And so for this reason, we have like 3 levels to which we can actually add value for an AI and therefore be cited, right? Improve the chances to be cited. Let's remember that the AI out there is not like a deterministic machine, right? It's a probabilistic one. And therefore, what we do is, number one, of course, structured data through schema.org. Sure, fine. Number 2 is open link data. So how do we make sure that we also give it through a touch point that search like a machine out there can recognize, and can go actually traverse our knowledge graph in a more flexible way? Because again, remember that the key point is we want to give an AI agent out there the ability to actually and flexibly to find what a user wants. And then on the other side, of course, there is the entity page itself. For instance, the way we do it at WordLift, not only we inject the schema markup with the JSON-LD format on the page, we also use the open link data standard. So we give like a stable URI to each of the entities, so we make them machine readable, AI readable. On the other side, we also create like a published entity page who has a canonical to the main pages. Why? Because again, we create multiple access points for those AI to reason on top of our own data, so that we give them the sort of information that then is actually referencing other trusted sources like Wikidata or like other sources that an AI can go and traverse, that will give them the flexibility and option to find whatever they need to. I'm moving forward just because, again, I see that we're going a bit out of time. But again, even if we go back to schema, this is evolving into something which is quite agentic. So even looking just like at the vocabulary of the schema, this schema.org, there are more and more actions that we can point out. And this goes back a little bit to what I was saying before. think of Schema right now as an API endpoint for the AI interface out there, where you can point out all the not just things that you have on a website, so at brand level, author level, product level, but also all the actions that can be taken, all the tooling that is available, so that you make it possible for agents to actually convert your website into like an AI interface for the user. It's going to be like a dynamic UX served on search, right? So that's where we are. And of course, as a quick premise, and this is just a preview to what we might be covering in some of the next workshops, right now, the whole substrate for the agentic commerce is just developing. And while the website is still like the intermediary for whatever we do with the AI, an interesting thing is the website will going more and more beyond the website. So still the website is going to be relevant in the next like 3-5 years. But the interesting thing is more action is moving directly toward those AI agents. And for this, we leave it up to the next session so that we can move forward on the final part of the framework. But we can, use different protocols and also embed them into our knowledge graph infrastructure to actually convey things that are way more powerful to those AI interfaces.
Absolutely. And also invite whoever is listening, if you have any specific request for a session, we are here to discuss. We love doing it. So feel free to reach out. So to summarize, it's not enough for the content to be readable. It has to be also cheap to read. Schema, of course, gets you into the door, but on its own, it's not enough. And what actually wins the token budget is having linked entities and that AI can actually traverse to get more context fast. Pressure to be cheap to read is only going to be, of course, it's only to get stronger as more of the web moves towards agentic commerce, as Gennaro was saying. Now this is the part everybody came for, Gennaro. So in this last minute, please, if you can walk us through how this all comes together into something that a team can actually execute.
Absolutely, and great honor to see the comment in the chat from Phil Archer, and absolutely the GS1 extension to schema.org has been in production for many years. So there is a community, and I feel honored to see Phil dropping a comment here. But yeah, this again, there's been like a community that has been quite active and has seen the future for I would say decades. But it's we're glad to see that those stuff are becoming like super actionable, actually, extremely relevant right now. And so it's quite important, again, to try to explain why those matter. Now, going to the final piece of the framework, and you will forgive me, it's a framework, it's a simplification. So it has pieces that, might be it's a tactical framework. It's not something that, of course, we need to confuse for a strategy. Strategy is something else. It's something that we discussed so far. Is about us changing like the perspective on how we do things, understanding the fundamentals of what we discussed so far. So we can go now in the tactical. And very quick premise: what we discussed so far in this webinar is about what I call here the context graph, meaning it's what helps us ground and create like a sort of runtime memory layer for AIs to then generate an answer on the fly. With the team at WordLift, we're doing a lot of research to actually look at other parts of the funnel, because if you know the AI landscape, of course, right now we have 4 scaling laws working parallel. I'm not going to get into it because otherwise, again, we spend another half an hour on it. But the key point is there is a different part of a graph that you can use for different purposes. As an example, the perception graph is about how do we make sure that we understand what are the neural activation of a large language model about our brand. And so we can go in that discipline. And then there is like the signal graph that maybe comes before we build a graph that we use a lot internally, which is to understand what are the third-party signals that an AI understands about or can understand about a brand, so that we can build a more effective knowledge graph. And then, of course, there is the knowledge graph, the context graph, which is the one that we use for grounding and helping an AI to ground the content. And then I'm calling it here, maybe we'll see what Andrea, the founder of WordLift, thinks about it. It's what I call a container graph, which is as we know, most of the mode right now in AI is getting built in a harness, meaning what an agent does in a very local environment to do things. And therefore, what we can build is a sort of container graph that keeps the agent leashed to like a task, and therefore make it valuable, because we need to create valuable feedback loops for those agents to learn in the first place, right? So that's a little bit of a premise. We are talking about the context graph today. That's what we spoke about. Now, step one, how do you start making this into something which is fairly actionable? Number one, of course, you need to map your topical authority, which means number one, you need to understand what's the way you want an AI to semantically understand your brand, right? And you have here the different steps and very practical exercise that you can take. And then on the other side, you want to map the gap, like what is that I want to convey semantically as a brand, and what, for instance, an AI is reading about my brand right now. And there are like different signals to look at. For instance, when we start to do like this analysis, we still do it through usually through like oftentimes like through a website, still, because a website as of now is a source of a lot of grounded information, data. And now we can filter, first-party data about AI bots that come to our website. We look at the Google Search Console. The team at Bing has given us a very cool AI citation tool that is first-party data. So there are different ways that we can start mapping out those gaps. And then, of course, we can look at other things like, do we have blockers on our page for an AI? What is the semantic depth of the page? I mean, there are different signals that we can look at, right? This is part of first audit that we usually need to do in order to before we start doing anything. The second step, then, once we have understanding of the use case, what is the AI visibility use case that we want to cover. As an example, if I'm an e-commerce, maybe the use case is I want to improve the product performance, so the visibility of my products through AI search, right? So you start from the use case, and then you reverse engineer what you need to do and what sort of knowledge graph you need to build. And then from there, of course, you start to build, as we said, like a knowledge graph with specific characteristics. The way we do it, of course, again, is not about the schema markup, which is a way to expose the data. It's quite important, but building like knowledge graph to us for the high visibility use case, it means that you do it in a RDF format, which is format that can be understood to the outside world, that can follow like specific protocols, and then of course following the opening data standard, going and injected like through JSON-LD, for the simple reason, as we said before, that we actually make it possible for an AI to have multiple touch points to actually reason on top of the data that we're creating with the knowledge graph. And we're also creating a corpus of data that we can push out, which is creating a sort of consistency. A very important highlight at this point is, of course, we don't have control to whatever the AI is going to cite and answer on the other side, which is quite trivial to say. But the reason why we do it is because we want to at least control the message that we put out in the world. Because in the end, we are like technical, if you wish, marketers, but we are still doing branding, marketing, and we're trying to improve performance, for instance, a website, if that is the use case that we are after. Even though, as we know, the knowledge graph is a memory layer, for instance, that we use also a lot for the development of internal agentic use cases that go from content generation to auditing and much more. So there is a lot that you can do. Creativity in that case is the only thing that will help you out understand and mapping out all those potential use cases. And then, of course, once you've done those homeworks, then you can go and start like deploying the structured data, keeping into account that different level of structured data will serve different purposes, right? Because there is going to be a level that is about trust. For instance, if you do use structured data markups like organization person, of course, you need to, what you're doing is you're trying to improve the EAT signals for AI, meaning you're saying, okay, the data that I'm putting out there, you can trust it because it's coming from this organization that you can recognize also by looking at it, I don't know, through other trusted sources like, I don't know, Wikipedia, Wikidata. And then, of course, these that I'm publishing, if it's an editorial content, is coming from this person, and therefore you can trust it. So there is the trust layer. And then, of course, there is, let's say, also with things like breadcrumbs, we can explain the structure and the navigational layer. And then, of course, we have other things like the product layer of it with the specific markup for product service pages. And then we have other like let's say layers of structured data like article like FAQ page, which are about especially distribution, meaning how do I make sure that I increase the surface for which an AI can find my brand. So as an example, one thing that we see when we implement and we go live with the knowledge graph, again implementation, is that we see the explosion of queries for which the content page is getting covered, right? Because again, for one thing, the user behavior has changed. People are searching way more like they're prompting. And for the other thing is the reason why we do this exercise of going live with the structured data and then also with the, as we see with the content pipeline to expand the reach of those pages is because we want to cover way more granular intents that an AI can pick up and therefore cite us for our final user. And then from there, of course, you can do like you can follow like a query fan out enrichment strategy, where again you can also, as an example, something that we do is we usually train a custom model on top of the knowledge graph to ground and to actually expand the content that we can cover on a page through chunks or like through like a proper FAQ strategy. Which main goal is also to again increase the available surface that a page can reach. So that's a bit of what you can do there. So and then from there, of course, you start to test and learning. So everything that we do is just like test and learning. There is no fixed playbook that is going to work in all the cases. It's just like test and learning, and then from there you understand what can scale and what not. Of course, it's quite important for us to know which signals to look at. On our side, we look at multiple angles. Usually we give a lot of weight on first-party data, though, as we know, first-party data at the moment is still like a lot limited. The attribution pipeline is still like quite unclear. And so you need to know how to pick up those different signals. As an example, we usually do like a casual impact analysis between control and variant groups to actually help us isolate the approach. And even though we measure the organic traffic there, we still look at indirect signals like engagement metrics that if they go up, maybe it's a signal that a lot of it is coming from things like reviews, and then we do other qualitative assessment on the topic. And then, of course, you can start using the third-party metric and maybe tracking tool, which, you know, we're not necessarily like big fans of, just because, again, we know that prompt tracking is still like super tricky. We know that prompting is going to be changing every time that you do the prompt. Is very hard to replicate. AI is not, again, it's not a deterministic machine. So with all those caveats, but you can start tracking at least with first-party data how those AI citations are coming through, you know, GA filtered, through GSC, you know, data, through like things like being a webmaster AI performance tool and so forth. And that's those are like the 4 practical steps that you can start doing, I would say, on Monday, so that you can rest. Today is Friday, tomorrow is Friday. So, but that's a little bit of the practical takeaways from the workshop.
Thank you, Gennaro. I guess if you haven't done any of the above, you can also start tomorrow. I guess AI doesn't wait. So we are running a bit longer, like out of time. So I'll go directly to questions. So I invite anybody who has questions to drop them in the chat. Actually, I have one to open the floor that came to my mind while you were giving the 4 points. Let's say I'm someone that tomorrow starts doing all that you explained. How long until I see the first results? So I say I map my entities, I connect them to a graph. So it's going to take, of course, a bit of time and work. But then when can I expect to have the first signs?
This is always the hardest question to answer. But no, I mean, it's I would say the interesting thing is there is still there is a lot of data that you have right now through like the website, if you know how to read it, that can help you out in at least making sense of what an AI might want for the time being. So the interesting thing is if you start now by also probably reading the data that you have, which is, again, this is data that has value in the real world, because a lot of it is also commercial data. I think you can start having results. You know, usually, as an example, on our side, we do pilots in, I don't know, 3-6 months. And as we know, time of SEO is a little bit slower, but AI consumes content way faster, and the data that we give it often gets consumed, in a much faster way than maybe used to be with SEO. But I would say, usually 2-3 months, at least on our side, the framework that we have is within, the second month, the third month, we already start measuring the impact. So that's a good timeline.
Very, very nice. And another question that I got here is, does this work for e-commerce, and what are the cases where this works the best?
Yeah, absolutely. E-commerce is probably the most interesting one. And again, let's remember that today, if you have an e-commerce, and especially if you own the catalog, it's one of the most interesting use cases to actually trigger like the AI search piece, and also to actually work on the agentic commerce piece as well. Because again, as we said before, a lot of the infrastructure as well that Google is using as well to generate answers is getting grounded on existing infrastructure like the shopping graph. And as you can imagine, a lot of it is getting curated probably through like things like the feeds that we give to things like Google Merchant Platform, right? So the e-commerce use case is the most interesting one. It's the most powerful one, also because a mental model that at least for myself I use, and hopefully the team at WordLift also uses today. When you do product marketing through your catalog, is actually also doing branding. So I would say, since those AIs are finally able to pick up a lot of the signals that we pass through our products, we can convey a lot of things. As an example, you can convey now that your product is sustainable. You can convey the whole supply chain, whatever the product comes, and you can convey by doing optimization of the product that goes back to how the brand is also perceived, maybe by an AI.
Very nice. And one last question from Daniel in the chat about anatomy of citation, the phase for ground and cite that we had back in the deck, I think. When the results of the 812 subqueries are merged and ranked, any ideas how does the LLM handle any conflicting or contradictory information coming from different sources before generating the final answer and assigning the 3-5 citation? So,
I mean, as we know, at least machines, not like LLMs, love consistency. So as we know that there are like even in the structured data, sometimes there are like different elements that tell us that when you're missing consistency, even on things like as trivial as pricing, this might is not let's say a best practice, right? So of course, being consistent in the way we're putting out our structured data is critical, because it's going to help the LLM to make sense of it, right? And then on the other side, as we said, there are like other signals that then the LLM can look at, like the trust signal. So are you providing which one of the sources, at least that's what we usually think, which one of the sources is also providing me like the trust layer, or like the other layers that enable me to actually close the loop and therefore pick the top citation. So definitely consistency, and passing on multiple signals that also give the AI on the other side the trust on the data that we're providing and the provenance of the data. Those matter a lot on which information in the end gets picked up before it gets cited.
thank you for the answer. So it's 5:47, and that's all about the time we have for questions today. Thank you all for a great set of them. Thank you for tuning in and also being active in the chat. Before we go, two things. First, of course, what you heard today made you wonder where your site actually stands. And that's something that we can help you, of course, understand. So I think in the next slide, there's a QR code from which you can book a call with us. And during the call, we'll show you a premium AI visibility audit, no strings attached, of course, of your website. And of course, you can reach out to me and Gennaro via LinkedIn or email whenever you want to have any further questions. And second, this is the first in a series of sessions that we're planning on AI visibility and, of course, also structured data. If today was useful, please sign up to the next one. Don't miss it. Our LinkedIn page is always pretty active. So follow it. And Gennaro, do you want to add anything before we close? Otherwise,
No,
we are...
Yeah, as we said at the beginning, this is the reason why we started. This is a chance for us to connect with the community. So we would love to hear your feedback, what you're learning on a daily basis. Also, what would you like to see us cover next? Again, we could have gone way deeper on other topics and stuff, but let us know. We look forward to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and see you at the next session.